I'm Madison Mills. Today we're talking all things Robinhood, the free investing app that lets traders trade with no additional fees. And I'm joined today by Nir from Bloomberg Opinion to talk everything you need to know about Robinhood. For those watching, please comment with any questions you have for Nir, and I'll be watching those comments and I'll ask as many as I can. Nir, thank you so much for making time today. I want to just jump right into it. What is Robinhood and what do people need to know about it?
Hi, Madison. Thanks for having me. So Robinhood is a trading app. It is the first of its kind. It was launched in 2013 that allows you to buy stocks, options, some cryptocurrencies, exchange traded funds on your phone for free, accessible to anyone with no barriers to entry, no minimum account fees. And what's noteworthy about it is, excuse me, it didn't exist, before Robinhood came along. So, that kind of access didn't exist. And since Robinhood has come along, a lot of the brokerages that people are familiar with, Schwab, TD, Fidelity, and those folks have also gone to zero commissions, have opened up trading to everybody. And some of them are even rolling out their own apps. So it's been hugely influential now.
And what is the experience like on the app just for your basic user, right? What do people who are at home in quarantine potentially have, $100 to play around with? What do they need to know about getting involved with Robinhood?
Well, they should probably know two things. One is, by all accounts, it's a really fun app to go on. You can just go on it and shop for stocks and crypto and all kinds of fun stuff. And Robinhood has been amazingly successful at bringing people on. I mean, they have roughly 10 million users now. 2 million just this year. I think in the first quarter came on, so probably even more now. Those were the latest numbers. People love the app, but I think users should understand one sort of basic thing, which is Robinhood can be two different things. Robinhood can be basically like a place to gamble if you want, just for entertainment, to buy and sell stuff and see if you make money or lose money on it. And it can also be an investing platform where you can save money and invest it in index funds and stuff that you hold for a long time, like any responsible investor would do, and make money over long periods of time. And I think if you're going to go on Robinhood, I think you need to be clear with yourself about how you intend to use it, whether you intend to use it for entertainment, in which case, anything can happen. Yes, you might make money, but you're also likely to lose money. Or whether you're going to use it as like a savings and long-term investment platform. And it can be both of those things.
And you've written a lot about sort of how Robinhood is democratizing investing and making it more accessible for different types of populations. Can you talk about that shift?
Yeah, I mean, Robinhood is, Robinhood is great in the sense that I think Robinhood opened investing to everyone, was really the first, I would say, to open investing to everyone. And in that regard, I think it should be applauded, and also helped, like I said, bring transition, open up the industry in general. And the reason that's important is because, oftentimes we accuse ordinary investors of not being sophisticated enough to participate in markets. But the irony is, unless we give them access to markets, they're never going to become sophisticated enough. So Robinhood gives them that opportunity. Obviously, they're going to make mistakes. All investors make mistakes, but that's how you learn, and that's ultimately how we get, I think, to a more sophisticated, group of investors in the U.S. in general.
And in terms of users making mistakes, you've mentioned that the likelihood of you getting rich on Robinhood is a lot lower than the likelihood of you getting poor on Robinhood. Can you talk about that a little bit and what your advice is to folks who are maybe thinking, I'm going to get on this app and become a millionaire overnight?
Yeah, that's something we should make clear right out of the gate. You're not going to get rich on Robinhood, and you're very likely to become poor on Robinhood, assuming that what you're doing is gambling, using it for entertainment. You should think about Robinhood as any other type of entertainment. When you go out to eat, when you go to the theater, when you go to a casino, it costs you money. And if you go on to Robinhood and use it for entertainment and gambling, it's going to cost you money. It's not going to make you rich. And as long as you know that up front, and as long as you're okay with that, then everybody's fine. I think where users are going to run into trouble is if they buy this narrative that they are somehow going to make tons of money buying and selling stuff on Robinhood. Most of them, the vast majority of them, are going to be disappointed, and that's where the disconnect is going to come through. So I think the more openly we talk about it, the more honestly we talk about it, I think the more users will sort of have an experience that aligns with what they like.
And we're in a moment of very distinct economic unrest in the country, which I think is important for us to note, record unemployment and economic uncertainty, right? So what's your advice to folks who maybe don't have a lot to invest, if anything? Should they consider putting the very little amount that they have into Robinhood, or is it too risky of a place to put your money?
Yeah, Madison, I think it's an important question in this moment, because normally when we're talking about this, it's like garden variety risk. But I think like the risk has been heightened significantly by the fact that we're in this epidemic and in this crisis. And, obviously a lot of people, millions of people have already lost their jobs. If this thing continues to go on, more people are likely to lose their jobs. And in that type of an environment, having cash around is important. So two things. One is, obviously, don't gamble with money that you can't afford to lose. You should assume, again, that whatever you go on to Robinhood to gamble with, to entertain yourself with, you're going to lose. But also, just as importantly, think about whether this is the time that you want to start investing. Whatever you invest, if you buy an index fund, it's impossible to know what's going to happen in the next month, 6 months, year, maybe even 3 years. You really have to be in it for the long term. And so what you really need to think about is, what cash can I forego today? What cash am I prepared to invest right now and leave it sitting around no matter what happens for, I would say, at least 5-7 years or longer. And that's a consideration that's really important in this moment that you otherwise would need to think about.
Right, thinking more about the long-term game than short term. And on the flip side of that, why is it a good time to invest right now?
Well, it's a great time in the sense that, usually when there's a crisis, the old saying is, when there's blood on the streets, buy real estate. The same thing goes for stocks and everything else. We're in a crisis, we're in an epidemic. And in general, there's a lot of companies are in a pinch. It means that their stocks are down. And so in general, if you have the cash to buy, you want to buy now. That doesn't mean that it won't go lower. It could, but no one can time the bottom of these things, right? No one knows where the bottom is. All you can do is say, am I buying it more cheaply than I bought it before? And in general, with some exceptions like tech companies and whatever that have done really well, in general, you're buying stocks more cheaply than you could have done in January. So if you can part with your money for a long period of time, it's time to do it.
And for folks who have enough to play around with Robinhood and potentially multiple other types of investment, right? What's your advice to them? Should they diversify where they're putting their money? Should they put everything into day trading on Robinhood? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, don't put all your money into day trading on Robinhood. But some people do worry about having all their money with one broker, like having just all their money in a Robinhood account as opposed to spreading it around among various brokers.
Sure.
I'm not going to say that's not something people should do. I happen to think that the risk involved in having your money in one particular broker is pretty low. It's certainly a lot lower than the risk of your getting on Robinhood and doing stupid things and gambling your money away. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Having said that, if it makes people feel better to sort of spread their eggs around various, broker baskets, so to speak, there's no harm in that. Totally fine. Is that what you meant, Madison, by the way? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. How to diversify, and whether, I see a lot of Reddit bros who are talking about, this is the way to cheat the system. We're going to put all our money into Robinhood and do XYZ thing. And I wondered, as a finance expert, your thoughts on the efficacy of that decision.
I mean, unless I understand what they mean, I mean, there's no free lunch around where you put your money, So right. Yeah, I mean, Robinhood is great, but I mean, is it any better than any other place where you can trade for free? No, not in any substantive way. If you prefer the Robinhood's app to somebody else's, online or app interface, great, go with what you like. But in substance, there shouldn't be any difference.
And I also want to take a moment to remind our audience what we're talking about for folks who've just tuned in. We're talking about Robinhood, the investing app. For those of you watching, please comment with any questions you have for Nir. You have direct access to an expert on this app right now, so comment with any questions you have for him, and we will throw them at you. Circling back a little bit, what are your thoughts on how seasoned investors are looking at this app? Are they looking at people bypassing their services and getting a little annoyed by that?
That's really interesting to think about because obviously we can really only speculate about how the traditional industry is watching this. I have to think they're of two minds. On the one hand, I think anything that brings more investors into the playing field is good for everybody. Because obviously it raises the number of customers that are out there, and everybody's fighting for customers. The more, the merrier. On the other hand, a lot of I can't help but think that a lot of people are going to, as a result of being able to learn from going on to platforms like Robinhood, that a lot of them are going to say, you know what, I can do this myself. I don't necessarily need the help of financial professionals. And I think ultimately, the financial industry has to be looking at this with a little bit of nervousness, because if enough of them decide that they can do it themselves, then obviously that a lot of the traditional sort of financial professionals are not going to be needed. So I suspect there are two minds.
Do you think the industry is taking Robinhood seriously and planning to react?
I don't think they did initially. I mean, I don't think they knew what to make of it. I mean, I think they thought that it would be a game that wouldn't be widely adopted. But I mean, now there's no doubt in my mind that they're taking it seriously. I mean, we're talking about millions of users using it, way more adoption than traditional brokers have seen, certainly recently. And I believe Fidelity just rolled out a trading app with zero commissions. And so I think you're going to have more of the established players effectively roll out a Robinhood type app. And so to me, that is the clear sign that they're taking it as seriously as anyone can.
That's really interesting to me. How do you think Robinhood would respond to that? Do you think that they'll roll out, additional services like credit cards or anything to diversify themselves if competitors start copying them in a way?
I think they'll need to. This is a really interesting discussion because we have a precedent for this. I'm aging myself now, and a lot of people probably may not even get the reference, but like in the late 1990s, when there was like the big tech boom, like big tech bubble, version 1, people forget that there were all these online banks that came along and said, why are you going to an ATM? Just go online and transact online. And what happened was the big established players just rolled out their own online interface. Citibank and Chase, they all rolled that out, and they put all the newcomers out of business. I mean, ask anyone to name you one online bank from the late 90s, and no one, not a single person will be able to name one. I don't even remember. I lived through the era, and I don't remember any of their names. And so the question is, this time around, will it be the same story? Will all these newcomers survive? I suspect maybe a handful will, but the vast majority of them won't. Whether Robinhood will be among the survivors obviously remains to be seen, but certainly their chances, I think, will increase if they're able to roll out sort of the full breadth of services that someone like a Fidelity or a JP Morgan or whoever is obviously going to bring to the table.
And digging back into the app itself for a moment, what are some things that people might be surprised to find in the app? For example, we got a lot of user questions about how you have to put in your social security number. Why is that? And is there anything else people should know about just interacting with the app before downloading it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's something that we should note to people in general who have never opened a brokerage account. Robinhood says that half of their users, that is their first brokerage account. So it seems as if there are a lot of people who are going on there who have never had a brokerage account. And one of the things they might be surprised about is when you open a brokerage account, you've got to hand over a lot of personal information. And the reason is there are laws in place that require brokers to collect these so-called know your customer rules that require them to collect all this personal information about your date of birth, social security number, and all that stuff. If all you've done is open like a anonymous Twitter account or Gmail address or whatever, you're not used to this. But on Robinhood, you're going to have to give up some information. I wouldn't worry about that. I don't find that problematic. Anytime you do something that's serious, and I would say opening a brokerage account is a serious step. Even though it's free and you don't have to commit any money up front, it's still a serious step. If you buy a house and you apply for a mortgage or whatever, you're going to have to tell people who you are. And so I wouldn't let that stop anyone. In terms of the rest of it, I think they might be struck by how sort of people have pushed back on this when I've written about this, but I think people might be struck at how game-like the app is. It's not your traditional stay, go online, open a brokerage account. It has some bells and whistles that you probably have never encountered before in a financial. And I don't know, to be honest, that's great. I think it makes light of the sort of the seriousness that people should bring into sort of giving their money to a brokerage account. But it makes it fun. I'll give them that.
Right. And you bring up some of the potentially ethical concerns of the app, which mirrors a user question we have. Someone asked, what other apps would you recommend? Is there anything else that's better for people to use?
I mean, at this moment, probably not. I mean, if what you're looking for is an app-based trading platform, probably not, but my guess is that's going to change very quickly, right? So just, for anyone that is looking for options, I would just keep your eyes open. My guess is in the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to see more of these things coming to market. But right now, yeah, I mean, I think again, if what you want is an app, I think Robinhood is probably the place you should go.
And Robinhood's been around since 2013, correct?
Yeah.
Why has it taken this long for it to catch on and for people to get on the let's create a competitor train?
I know, it's weird, right? You would have thought that it would have gotten more adoption sooner. I mean, the popular narrative, I have not been able to corroborate this, but the popular narrative, of course, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, is that it's the coronavirus, that, people have time and they might have some extra money. And because they're not spending it on other things like going out to restaurants and movies or whatever. And there's no sports and they want to entertain themselves. And so they're just going on Robinhood. But, the numbers don't necessarily comport. I mean, there were millions of users who came onto Robinhood in the last year. And specifically in the first quarter, most of which was before this pandemic hit, the shutdown hit, right? Because the shutdown really only hit in March, which was the end of the first quarter. So I'm not sure that jives with the actual numbers, but we'll see where their second quarter numbers come out and whether, sort of more adoption is hit. But Madison, I think the most honest answer to your question is really who knows?
Right.
I think it just I think for whatever reason, Robinhood just sort of entered like the popular imagination and just caught fire, as some things sometimes do.
Right. It's hard to judge exactly what the impetus is behind any app's popularity, I guess. There's so many things. We're getting a lot of amazing user questions, so I'm going to jump into some of these. One user asked, how does Robinhood make their money?
Well, that's a really good question. We don't know for sure, but suspicions are that they make it in two ways. One is they probably make money on the cash balances that users leave, laying around uninvested. There is, we know that because a lot of the other brokers, that's the way they make money. Schwab, for example, a big chunk of the revenue comes from that, comes from the cash balances. They also make money presumably on the trades themselves. The trades flow to whoever ultimately executes them. That's not Robinhood, and Robinhood presumably makes some money somehow on those trades. So that's probably the two main sources. But as time goes by and Robinhood sort of discloses more of where the revenue comes from, these answers will become more apparent. But that's my best guess now.
Sure. And digging into that, one other user asked, do they sell our private data?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, in fairness, you could never rule that out, right? Because as we know, tech companies make money off of data, so we can never rule that out. But I would say, you're certainly you're in no more jeopardy than you would be if you use Facebook or Google or anyone else that we know is actually making money off of data. And also, Madison, I would say, going back for a second to the earlier question,
Sure.
I think a lot of people might, the reason they want to know, I suspect, where Robinhood makes money is they might be worried that, even though it's free, they're making money off of them in some way that they shouldn't be and whatever. My guess is there's very little of that, I mean, to the extent that Robinhood makes money off trade allocations, off trade flow, that's probably not unique to them. That's probably going on everywhere. And so this is not a uniquely Robinhood cost, if there's a cost at all. And if there is, it's going to be very small. So that's sort of my view about how nervous or, sort of worried you should be about this.
Right. And another user asked about just how do they afford to do this? How do they afford to give this free service, which I think you're touching on, but do you have any more information about how they're able to do this?
Well, I think like a lot of startups, and I would say Robinhood is still in that phase, even though they've been around for 7 years, is, they don't make a ton of money yet. A lot of the robo advisors, they don't make money. They're effectively living off of venture money and seed money in order to subsidize this for users. The idea is at some point they will get big enough where they start to make money off of this stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think most of the answer is they're not making huge amounts of money on users yet.
Do we know anything about the makeup of Robinhood, how big they are, how many employees they have, things like that would give us insight into their profitability?
I've tried to get numbers. I have not been able to find reliable numbers for anything except users. Sure. Users, I think we have decent data, but everything else is harder to know. The number of, I've tried to find out information on the number of trades, that kind of stuff. I haven't been able to find it.
Right. And we have 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we answer everyone's questions. Thank you all who are watching and commenting with your questions. It's so helpful for us. Nir, can we just recircle back to you're downloading the app. What do you do? What is a good way to get started on Robinhood and to hopefully make some money?
Well, so here's what I would say. It's a pretty intuitive app. If you want to, going back to my two buckets, if you want to entertain yourself, and probably the most entertainment you're going to find on this system, and probably the least risky, although obviously with risk, probably the least amount of trouble you can get into, is just going on there and just shopping around for stocks. And you can just start with the stuff that you know, right? I mean, everyone knows the big companies. And if you look, Robinhood does publish a list of its most popular stocks at any given time. And, among them are the household names, everything from car makers, Ford and GM to, the big tech companies like Apple and Facebook, Tesla, all the stuff that people know. So if you're a new user and you want to basically stay out of big trouble, that's probably the place you should start. If on the other hand, you're looking to put money away for the long term, then I would recommend buying an ETF, probably a broad market, cheap ETF, like an S&P 500 ETF or a global stock ETF or something like that, where you know that you're not going to lose all your money. Yes, it'll go up and down in value, but if you leave it in there for the long term, you're very likely to make money. The one thing we should warn users is where you can get into trouble is buying derivatives, like options, and using margin, borrowing money from Robinhood in order to invest. You can get into big trouble very quickly doing that kind of stuff. And so if you're a new user, I wouldn't recommend that's where you start to sort of entertain yourself with. Just start with on the stock side and see how it goes, and leave the derivatives, the options, and the margins to the experts, which very few of them are probably on Robinhood, in fairness.
Right. That's an interesting question. How many seasoned investors are on Robinhood, right? Another very small amount. Just to stock potentially. One other user question we got in is, will Robinhood go public?
Oh, I suspect I'd be shocked if they didn't go public. I mean, if you just think about this from a cold calculated business perspective, right? You have people who invested in them as a seed company, as a venture company, and they're going to need to pull their money out. And so they're going to do it in one of two ways. Either they're going to sell Robinhood to somebody else, or they're going to go public. And my guess is because Robinhood has become so popular and has gotten so many users, my guess is they're going to be a very attractive public offering, right? I mean, my guess is if Robinhood went public tomorrow, a lot of people would buy its shares, and those are ultimately the companies that do go public. So I suspect that's what they're going to do, as opposed to trying to sell themselves to somebody else who will make the money.
And one final question I have for you about using the app. How can people get educated about which stocks to buy and just good user decisions, right? What's the best way for people to navigate the choices they have to make on Robinhood?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very unpopular answer, I can tell you right now. I mean, in general, if I'm being totally, if I'm sort of, my view about this is that people should stay away from buying individual stocks in general. And the reason is any company can go bust. This is a really hard thing to sell to people right now in this moment, because it's been a while since we've seen companies go bust. But like, just think back to the financial crisis and think about all the big banks that once people thought were like bulletproof, that went out of business, like went poof in one night. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, right? Like the list goes on and on. These were like serious companies that no one imagined could disappear and did. And if you go back to previous busts, there's lots of them. Like lots of companies, big companies go bust all the time. So the problem is when you buy stocks, you should be prepared to lose all of your money, which is not something you have to worry about when you buy the entire market like the S&P 500. And so in general, people don't like losing all their money, and they're probably not going to watch it closely enough to guard against it, and therefore they shouldn't buy individual stock. Okay, so I've cleared my throat. Having said that, if you want to buy individual companies, sure, you can. I mean, channel your inner Warren Buffett or whoever your stock picking hero of the day is, and do some research on the company. I mean, like if you want to be, if you really want to be serious about it, pick a company that, I guess start with a company who you like and you buy their products or whatever, and then go and like read their financial statements. I know people are like, are you crazy? I'm not going to read their financial statements. But I mean, this is what stock pickers do, and see what you think. I mean, obviously you want companies that you think are going to do well in the future, that are run well, and that, maybe even make money today and make lots of it like a Facebook or Apple, and put your money on the table and see what happens.
I think that's an excellent place for us to leave off, Nir. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone watching, thank you for your comments. You can find Nir on Twitter, and also we're going to link to his opinion piece writing on Robinhood so you can read more on that. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Nir.
Bye, Madison.